Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. My name is Carlos Childs. I am the state organizing director for Our Revolution, Maryland. You all, I am so excited to be here today. But before we get started, please go ahead, drop your name, your pronouns, and where you're tuning in from in the chat so we can shout you out. But before I start that, I want to say we are jam-packed with some awesome gubernatorial candidates. I mean, we have uh, former Labor Secretary Tom Perez. We have former Education Secretary John King, former Prince George's County Executive Rushern Baker. We have former Prince George's County Councilwoman Monique Anderson Walker. We have former Obama administration official Ashwani Jain as well. You all, we have an awesome jam-packed crew here today so we can learn more about what they're running on, why they're running, what they plan to do, and how they plan to make Maryland as a progressive stronghold state. So again, go ahead, put your name, where you're tuning in from, and your pronouns in the chat so we can go ahead and shout you out. What is up, Henry? What's up, Yoni, Emily, Ruth from Columbia? What's up, Dave and Rachel? He and she. I love it. I love it. What is up, Paul? What is up, Misha? What's up from OR Baltimore, one of our chapter leaders over there? What's up, Adrian, Deborah, Paulette? Michael, please, what is up, you all? What is up? It's so glad to have everybody here again. And one other thing before we get started soon here as well, if you have any questions at all, remember, please put them in the Q&A section, and that's right down there next to the chat. What's up, Ruth from Annapolis? What is up, Randy Barber? How's it going? One of our co-leaders for Our Revolution Western Maryland. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I love seeing all the family. I feel like this is one big progressive house right here. I am loving it. What is up, Mark? What is up, Paul and Yvonne? What's up, Paul Basich? What's up, Andrew from German? What's up, Andrew from Germantown? One of our long-standing members, leaders, and one of the Central Committee members in Montgomery County. Shout out to you. Shout out to all the people running, all the people here. What's up, John Spillane? And again, for those joining us who just joined us, we have an awesome jam-packed agenda. We have wonderful candidates here speaking. We have, former Education Secretary John King. We have former Prince George's County Executive Rushern Baker. We have former Prince George's County Councilwoman Monique Anderson Walker. We have former Labor Secretary Tom Perez and former Obama administration official Ashwani Jain. You all, that is a lot of names. It's a lot of people, but we're going to learn a lot about them. You all, I am so excited for this. I am so excited to get started. And I know all of you all are probably like, we did not come here to hear Carlos. We came here to hear these amazing candidates and all that they have to offer. What's up, Richard from Tacoma Park? So thank you for the pronouns you'll see is what you see. I love it. I love it. Definitely. Thank you all for joining. And with that, I'm going to do my normal spiel. I would hope, if you want to see us continue doing these things, if you want to see us continue hosting these town halls, these forums, getting to know people, getting to know our candidates, working on progressive policies, doing some on the ground activism work, remember, please donate to Our Revolution. And that is going to OUR dot, look at me messing up. OURREV.US/MDMEM. As you can see, I'm still trying to wake up a little bit, you all. So please donate. Any donation will help, either a one-time donation or a $5 monthly donation. And if you do a $5 monthly donation, you get a little Our Revolution card too. Be a card carrying member, help you get out of a few progressive jams that you may be in as well. You all, we are going to go ahead and get started here. And I am so happy and proud to pass it to our chair, Chrissy Holt.
Thank you, Carlos. It's really exciting to have 5 candidates from Maryland's top office represented here today. We'll hear from them in less than 60 seconds. I'm going to talk really fast to make time for the panel. But I want to make one last announcement. We are always proud to announce our endorsements, and we've backed many great progressives over the years. You'll see them at ourrevolutionmd.com. But the two we're proudest of are these two. Our great Baltimore County leader, incumbent state delegate Sheila Gruth, running in Baltimore, and our own Carlos, our state organizing director, running for Charles County Commissioner. Now, let's get ready for the main event. Each of our 5 candidates gets 60 seconds to tell us why they're running and why they're qualified. Then we'll move to a panel discussion focusing on several critically important issues in Maryland. But we have one more step. We wanted you to take a few seconds to tell us which candidate you believe you will likely vote for in the primary. And we will do the survey now, and we will do it at the end of the forum. So first up is our former Prince George's County Executive, Rushern Baker. Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Thank you. And thank you for having us this morning. And Carlos, thank you for waking us up. As I said, I'm former Prince George's County Executive. I served 8 years here, and I served 8 years in the House of Delegates. We're at a critical stage in our history, not just in Maryland, but across the nation. And at this time, it's not just what you say or what you believe, it's what you can get done. And at this stage in our state and in our nation, we need somebody who's actually done these things that we talk about. Expanded healthcare for folks who were uninsured and underinsured at the beginning of my administration. Not only reduce crime in Prince George's County, but also reduce the rest. Expanded our wages. So we had the highest minimum wage in the state that we increased. But it's really important at this point that we use Maryland as a leader for the rest of the nation on how we can come to grips with America's coming to this fork in the road and coming to see that its original sin of slavery, dealing with it. Maryland's in a position where we can actually do that, but we need a leader who's actually done it before, who doesn't need time to understand find out where the bathroom is, but knows how to use the state, the federal, and the local level to move us forward. So I look forward to chatting with you and answering your questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Baker. And thank you for being on time. I will say that we are going to keep everybody to a timeline, and Hal will kindly interject. He will stop you by saying thank you if you run over time. Okay, so let's move on now. Let's hear from Ashwani Jain. He's the former Obama administration appointee. Welcome.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Ashwani Jain. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a 32-year-old cancer survivor, a son of immigrants and small business owners, and a product of Maryland public schools. I've worked in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, the Obama White House, and 2 federal agencies. I'm running for governor to make politics inclusive and accessible, because right now it's not. If you are Black or brown, you feel like this country doesn't value your life. If you're trans, you feel like your life seems inappropriate. If you're a woman, you feel disgusted that men can still decide what you do with your body. If you're someone with a disability, you feel talked down to. And if you're a young person, you're told you don't have enough experience to lead on issues, even though it's been young people who led the feminist, labor, climate, and Black Lives Matter movements. But I believe decisions about us should not be made without us. So I appreciate this opportunity, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you. Thanks, Ashwani. I'm actually going to take the liberty and call everybody by their first names. So next up is former DNC Chair Tom Perez. Tell us why you're running, please.
Good morning. It's great to be with everyone. I'm Tom Perez, and I'm running for governor so that we can have jobs, justice, and opportunity across this state. My entire career in service, whether it was at a local level, a state level, or at a federal level, has been about jobs, justice, and opportunity for everyone. Whether it was running the Civil Rights Division 10 years ago and making sure that civil rights was no longer the unfinished business of America, whether it was being your labor secretary at a state level or a federal level, or whether it was working on the Montgomery County Council as the first Latino ever elected to the council, making sure that people had a fair shake. And that's why I'm running. And as you'll see from our platform, we're running to make sure that every Marylander has access to quality, affordable health care. We're running to make sure that we are aggressive, leading the charge, not following on climate change, making sure that we come out of this pandemic, making sure that zip code never determines
10 seconds.
State. That's why I'm running, and I look forward to this discussion this morning.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Hal. Running for lieutenant governor as the running mate to Peter Franchot is Monique Anderson Walker. She is a former Prince George's Council member. Welcome, Monique.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate being here. Peter and I are very excited about the possibility of us leading this wonderful state. I'm born and raised right here in Maryland. Had the opportunity to represent Maryland, but the reason why, as a county council person, the reason why we are running is because we understand that we can hit the ground running. Both of us have recent experience in the local and state level and have been implementers in various levels in the areas of healthcare, in the areas of education expansion. And what we're wanting to do is make sure that we raise the opportunity for everyone, that everyone has generational wealth potential, that we create pathways to the middle class through job creation. And this isn't just speak. This is something that's based upon planning that is already in place that we're looking forward to scale in the areas of education and health, and also in preserving opportunities and retirement funds, quite frankly, for our senior citizens. We want everyone to get the rich experience of Maryland. Thank you.
Thanks, Monique. Okay, our final candidate to speak is former Secretary of Education, John King. Welcome, John.
Thanks so much. Thrilled to be here this morning. Look, I decided to run for governor for the very same reasons I became a teacher in the first place, a deep belief in the role that public institutions can play in people's lives because public schools saved mine. When I was a kid, both my parents were educators, but they both passed away when I was little. My mom when I was 8 and my dad when I was 12. And the period when it was just my dad and me, my dad was struggling with Alzheimer's. Home was incredibly difficult. And the thing that saved me was school. And that's what drove me to become a teacher, a principal, to lead schools at the local level and state level before serving as Secretary of Education for President Obama. But as an educator, you see how all the other systems impact kids, whether or not they have safe and affordable housing, whether or not they're food insecure, whether or not their family has health care, whether or not parents can find a good job. And ultimately, for me, running for governor is about making this a New Deal moment where we tackle our deepest systemic challenges as a state, and I look forward to discussing those today.
Thank you, John. And thank you all. This is a great start, and we appreciate you all for the previous service that you've done for us and for our communities and for running for office. It's a very difficult task, and we thank you for stepping up. Now I'm going to bring on our moderators. I'm going to bring on Chris Izzo he runs our chapter in Western Maryland, and Kat Yu, who is the chair of Montgomery County, co-chair of Montgomery County. I'll be joining them to ask topical questions of the candidates. And again, we have a lot to get to and not a lot of time. So please be brief and max 60 seconds in your responses. Let's start with Chris and a question about jobs. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Mr. Perez, I'm going to start with you. Okay. What is your plan to create good middle-class jobs in Maryland? And you can see from the slide that Hal has up that even with rising wages and salaries, we aren't keeping up with inflation. Mr. Perez. Unmute. Gotta unmute. Unmute.
There we go. Start over again.
There you go. Start again.
I think one of the major areas of potential job growth is in the clean energy context. Larry Hogan has abdicated responsibility on climate change and clean energy. When we become an offshore wind epicenter, we're going to be creating $30 to $40 an hour jobs right here in Maryland, union jobs. When we invest in infrastructure by building the red line, completing the purple line, building rail down to Charles County, those are good union jobs. Again, we have so much opportunity in that context. And as your former labor secretary, what I'm going to make sure we do is have project labor agreements so that we're not only completing these important projects and making these investments, but we're building the middle class. We're building a transportation infrastructure around the city of Baltimore so that people can get to those jobs. So I think when I hear Joe Biden say, when I think of climate change, I think of jobs, I think that is one of the principal areas of growth opportunity. Healthcare is always going to be an anchor in Maryland. Education is always going to be an anchor in Maryland. Cybersecurity is an anchor that can grow. But I think clean energy is an area where we can expand, and we've got unprecedented infrastructure dollars, unprecedented since Eisenhower. And that's going to be a real opportunity for us. And I want to make sure that those jobs are available to everyone. And that's why it's so important for us to invest in career and technical education so that we build that pipeline.
Ms. Anderson Walker.
Thank you. I've long stated that the two development, what we believe opportunities are for economic development expansion are the areas of health and wellness, as well as infrastructure. Health and wellness for obvious reasons. You know, we certainly look forward to getting past our COVID pandemic, but we will likely go into a chronic pandemic period where we'll need to have access to healthcare. So Peter and I have a plan to institute an expansion of opportunities for jobs there. Also in the area of infrastructure, not just with roads and bridges, but looking at the infrastructure you do not see, the stormwater management that is critical right now as we are experiencing climate issues and the attendant rain bombs that come with it. Also the infrastructure of broadband, expanding opportunities to reach out to areas that may not otherwise be able to feel connected. This too would give job opportunities. The infrastructure of our transit systems as well. There's a lot that we can do to build our economy. We're planning on 100,000 new jobs in 100 weeks. And the way to do that is partnerships with our trade, our building trades, with private industry, certainly, and nonprofits. We're looking forward to making Maryland, continuing to make Maryland wonderful.
Mr. King.
Thanks. Look, there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to grow jobs in the green energy revolution that we need as a state. There's an opportunity for good jobs in transportation, building the Red Line in Baltimore, finishing the Purple Line, building the Southern Maryland Light Rail project, making sure that buses are actually frequent and reliable throughout the state, expanding the Mark West. That's also going to help people get access to jobs. But the other thing that's worth noting about the graph is that we got to do more to make sure that the wages are good. That means we need unionization, and we need to accelerate raising the minimum wage. We need to index the minimum wage to inflation. We also have to help people address the costs in their lives. We need universal affordable childcare. We need investment in affordable housing, the investment in public transportation, and we have to treat healthcare as a human right. These are the ways that you make sure that people, whatever their job, are able to live a decent life.
Thank you. Mr. Jain.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So when it comes to economic development, I think you need to tackle every issue in a comprehensive way. And that's where the 150 plus policies that we've shared at janeforgovernor.com really come into play. One of those programs is what we call the Maryland Now Plan. This is fully paid for and is going to eliminate the state income tax for 95% of Maryland workers, make public transit free, create the nation's first guaranteed jobs program, legalize marijuana while expunging records, and impose anti-corruption measures that get money out of politics. Because at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we are reducing the cost of living for every Marylander, increase take-home pay, allow folks to retire in our state, businesses and individuals to move into our state, and finally have economic justice.
Mr. Baker.
Thanks for the question. You know, this pandemic has changed everything. It's one of the reasons I decided to run. This and George Floyd. We're at a point where it's not just to be able to say what you want to do or even think about good policies, but you've actually done it. We don't have any time to waste. Some of the very things that were said by the panelists on here are things that we did. At the same time, when I came in Prince George's County, we were at the bottom in job creation. By the time I left, we were leading in job creation five years in a row in the entire state. And we did it by investing in those very things, building a new regional medical center, which also addressed uninsured and underinsured, building MGM and making it a PLA when we did it. But we also did it by taking $50 million from our rainy day fund and investing in small businesses, because that's where the growth is going to happen. We did it by increasing the minimum wage to the highest in the state. hoping that the state would move forward with that. But you need somebody who's actually done these things.
Mr. Baker, I'm going to have a follow-up question, and then everyone, I'd like you all to comment on this follow-up, if you would, please. Mr. Baker, in light of the many pathologies associated with gambling, and the relatively few jobs provided by the casino at National Harbor, do you think it was worth the cost and money lost by working class people in Maryland to build a casino?
I do. I mean, and here's the thing. I served in the legislature when gaming, as they call it, first came about, and I voted against it every year I was there. As county executive, the only reason I did MGM was to make it a destination resort and not a slots barn or gaming or gambling. If you look at MGM, it's different from any other casino that's in the state of Maryland. One, you don't walk into actual casinos. You know, you walk into a hotel, into entertainment. And the other part is it created 6,000 union construction jobs and 4,000 jobs that continuously go there to local businesses in the state of Maryland. The other thing is it's now providing about $37 million to our school in extra money.
Mr. Perez.
Well, I agree with Rushern that on that front, it's been a good thing. And as your U.S. Labor Secretary, I spent a lot of time in Nevada working with the gaming industry, and what I learned from it, which was really helpful to me, was that there are career ladders at places like MGM that can enable you to start at one level and work your way up to management and elsewhere. The other thing I learned is that Marylanders, and I learned this when I was in the O'Malley administration, Marylanders were spending $300 million a year in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. And so it made no sense to export that money here to other states. And that's why I think it made sense.
Okay. Mr. Anderson Walker, please.
Sure, and MGM is in the district that I represent, District 8, which is National Harbor up to and including Joint Base Andrews. I will say this, listen, I'm glad that we do have it. There's an agglomeration effect that takes place when you have an anchor like an MGM. There are ripple effects as well, positive ripple effects that take place. We look at our community benefits agreements package that help with our roadway improvements, which help to put $1 million a year into safety in that immediate area, to support nonprofits in that immediate area. So there are a lot of positives besides what has already been mentioned with the wonderful labor jobs that are there and the agglomeration effect of the success of restaurants, the success of the convention center as well.
Mr. King.
Sure. Look, there have been some jobs created as a result of the casino. I acknowledge that. But I think part of what's happened is states, including Maryland, kind of use the promise of casino revenue to dodge the conversation about progressive tax reform. You know, if you look back over this COVID period, the 9 billionaires in the state increased their wealth by $12.4 billion. Jeff Bezos is literally shooting himself into space in a personal rocket ship. The solution to our challenges is not these quick fix revenue sources. It's progressive tax reform, where the people who make over $1 million a year and large corporations pay their fair share. And then we invest that in education, in apprenticeship programs, in a state bank that will help small businesses start and grow in the state. We invest that in a Green New Deal. That's the future.
And Mr. Jain.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think this question really stems to accountability and transparency with how we're allocating our funds. The fact that we were promised that revenue from casinos would go to public schools when we voted for it in 2007, 2008, and it didn't go that way. I think there's an issue with having these kinds of measures passed, but unable to hold our elected officials accountable in terms of where that money is coming from, the promised revenue streams that are going to go to certain institutions and certain organizations and certain parts of our economy, like our public schools. And so that's where I think it stems from how you run your campaigns. The fact that our campaign is the only one that has 100% free events, and where residents who are impacted by these policies have a seat at the table in the policy making and the strategy making, I think goes a long way when it comes to really holding these dollars transparent and accountable so that we're actually benefiting the local economy as well as the state economy.
Thank you. Thank you all. I have another question. In Maryland, the problem of stagnant wages is compounded by the fact that 90% of the public sector workers don't have the right to form a union. Would you advocate in the General Assembly legislation that would guarantee collective bargaining for all public workers in local jurisdictions? And I'll start with Mr. Jain. I'm going to jump this around a little bit. Mr. Jain, you go first.
Short answer is yes. If folks go to my labor rights platform at janeforgovernor.com that we shared a year and a half ago, we talk about making sure we have collective bargaining, we have living wages. I'm proud that the Maryland legislature finally passed paid family and medical leave. We have to make sure that we're taking care of workers and employees. And I think sometimes there's this notion that what's good for employees and workers must be bad for business and vice versa. The reality is both can benefit if we tackle the issue comprehensively. I come from a small business background, and we understand the importance of corporate social responsibility, and that when your employees, when workers are taken care of, when they're invested in, they become more loyal and more productive, and they stay within the same geographic area of that company, or as it relates to our public employees, they are able to stay in these jobs that provide so many of us so many benefits and allow us to accomplish all the things we want to accomplish.
Mr. Baker.
Short answer is yes. It's something that I actually pushed when I was in the legislature on appropriation for Prince George's Community College to organize. I also want to agree with something that that my good friend Ashwani said about showing businesses it could work on both sides. We actually did that by investing. We said, listen, if these are going to be good union jobs, but you're also going to be able to pay our workers more, and we as a government are going to invest in that. It's showing it's not either or. And we did that, which is why we were able to create the type of jobs that we saw in Prince George's County that we can do across the state that are permanent, that are not just going to be here for a minute. Going back to MGM, you know, they put $1.4 billion to build that casino. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson Walker, please.
I am so excited about unions that part of our focus is actually to create 100,000 new jobs by working directly with our unions, with our building trades. My background in commercial real estate has been very helpful in me understanding what it takes to build a wonderful economy. Infrastructure is key to that. There's a recognition that we could very likely go into a big dig for our infrastructure projects over the next 30 years or so. And in order to do that, we're going to have to create our own workers for those infrastructure jobs. And we are already in process having conversations to look at how our high schools can pair up with our locals in those infrastructure jobs so that we can start preparing them for the next training so they can go directly into these wonderful family supporting jobs. Second to that, we have also partnered with our locals so that they are directly in discussions with us on policy, so that we're sensitive in making policy. Thank you.
Mr. Perez.
Absolutely. I'm really proud to have the support of over 130,000 union households whose unions have endorsed, far more than any other candidate in this race. That's because they've studied my record. I appreciate the support of my good friend Larry Cohen, for instance, the former president of CWA. The union movement brought us the weekend. The union movement brought us the middle class. If you want to figure out what someone's going to do in the future, look at what they've done in the past. I've always stood up for the labor movement. And one of the many advantages of increasing labor union density is that it will benefit everyone and it will disproportionately benefit Black workers, because Black workers are more likely than workers of any other race to be unionized. So it's not only good for wages across the board. As we seek to lift wages in communities of color, this is a really important step forward. And that is why I've always supported. I did stuff at a federal level to make sure that unions could organize.
And Mr. King.
Yes, all public workers should be able to unionize at the local and state level. I think we got to look at some of the things the Hogan administration has done to get around unionization, and I'm committed to reversing those things. They have outsourced services through private contracts to get around having public employees do the work, and it's harmed the quality of the work. You think about something like Mobility Link, where now people are waiting 2-3 hours to get transportation, folks with disabilities, because that contract was outsourced. You think about the public-private partnerships, which are really a euphemism for privatization, like the Purple Line that's now $4 billion over budget and 4 years behind. We also need strong protections to strengthen the bargaining power of unions, like a strong anti-retaliation law.
Thank all of you. Thanks for answering my questions. And I'm going to turn this over to Kat.
Thanks, Chris. One of the biggest concerns that poor, struggling, working class Americans face is the cost of education. In 2019, the average Maryland resident owed over $27,000 in student loans. Possibly many of these people will never, ever pay this debt off. Do you support debt-free post-secondary vocational schools, community colleges, four-year undergrad? And if so, how would you fund it? We'll start with former Secretary of Education, John King.
Yeah, look, this is a hugely important issue. I was the first United States Secretary of Education to call for the Biden administration canceling debt for all borrowers. That would liberate people who are now saddled with debt that keeps them from starting a business, buying a home, starting a family. But in Maryland, there are some things that we can do immediately. We can freeze tuition at the University of Maryland system, which I would do. We can commit the resources to make 2 years of community college or the first 2 years at one of our 4 HBCUs free for students. And the way we pay for that is with progressive tax reform, asking those who make over $1 million and our largest corporations to pay their fair share. Because investing in higher education is the path to a stronger economy long term. We also should have generous debt forgiveness for folks who are teachers, who are mental health service providers, going into fields we desperately need.
Next candidate, do we have Kat?
I'm sorry. Tom?
Yeah, I was a Pell Grant kid. This stuff is very personal to me. My basic value proposition is that your ability to pay should never stand in the way of your getting an education. And so I agree with John that we should, eliminate at a federal level student debt. What we can do here at a state level is to operationalize, especially at a 2-year institution. If you can't afford to pay for it, it will be free. I also think, and my siblings, I have 3 siblings who are doctors, and they had a scholarship through the public health service. They paid their medical school, and then for every year they got that tuition, they served in a physician shortage area. I think we can incentivize nurses and school teachers here by having similar service years, so that get people to go and become an educator, and we'll pay your tuition if you give back. I think that's a wonderful way to incentivize people to get into these high demand occupations.
Rushern. I think he's on mute.
I'm off now. Thank you. Yes, we have to find a way to do this. What we did, especially for 2 years, I moved toward a 2-year, our community college being free. We actually started this practice in Prince George's County when we took economic development money and put it toward our community college, combining it with not only continuing education for our children, but also workforce development. I think we should move toward that with our community college. They should be free, but we should also increase at the state level the amount of money we give those community colleges so they don't lose the professors and those folks. We also have to freeze tuition at our University of Maryland system so it's affordable. But you do this, and there's a way that you can do it. Something I supported, combined reporting.
Monique.
So I'm going to answer this question in two ways. Yes, I think that we should find a way to make it much easier for people to get educated who may not come from families that can afford this education, and on the higher level. On the very basic level, elementary, middle, and high school, I think that we should start implementing stronger STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics programs for the very young, so that they are inspired and can carry that through. As part of that experience as well, I think that they should be able to get certifications and licensing so they can come out of high school prepared to go into a career. Certainly that's the cheapest. The other opportunities that I know exist are the pairing of the middle college, which exists in Prince George's County now, and we want to carry over. The middle college allows students to graduate from high school with an AA degree.
Time.
So they're already ahead for free. Thank you.
And Ashwani.
Yeah, at janeforgovernor.com, I talk about the need at the federal level to cancel student debt. Locally, we must do more to increase accessibility and affordability of higher education, not just looking at higher education in a silo, but understanding that it touches everything from criminal justice reform, economic development, to climate justice. I would fully fund the CADE formula. I would expand work-study programs. I would protect undocumented students, building upon the advocacy work that I did with so many others with passing the Maryland DREAM Act in 2010. And cutting the eligibility of the state student loan debt tax credit at least in half. These are specific, tangible ways that we can help students, not only in the short term, but the long term. And not just students who graduate and go right after high school, but even those who return to higher education after they're already in the workforce.
Thank you. An NEA poll earlier this year found 55% of educators are likely to stop teaching earlier than they had planned. That's nearly double the proportion of teachers who said that in July 2020. What will you do as governor to retain quality teachers? John.
Yeah, this is a huge issue and a threat to the health of our society if we can't keep good teachers in the classroom. We've got to address several things. One is we've got to follow through on the blueprint for Maryland's future and make sure that schools have the resources they need. But we have to see that as the floor, not the ceiling, for our investment in our schools. There are fundamental working conditions challenges. Teachers who are teaching in schools where they don't have heat or air conditioning in Baltimore. School counselor I talked to in Prince George's County a couple of weeks ago has 800 students for one school counselor. Those working conditions issues have to be addressed, and we have to strengthen the bargaining power of teachers. I testified on a bill to allow class size to be a subject of bargaining in Maryland, which currently is not allowed.
Okay. Rushern.
Yeah, I mean, it was a problem before the pandemic, and the pandemic has just exacerbated the problem. Some of the things that John talked about is absolutely right. Some of the things I tried to do as a legislator and did as county executive was look at the conditions, not only the physical condition of the building, but also the leadership structure within the schools itself, the principal leadership, supporting teachers so that they get educational opportunities to continue to learn their craft, but also giving them the opportunities to actually teach and not be counselors at every phase. But that requires that we bring in the things that they don't have within inside those four walls. This is an area where we can actually use our health department, our transportation, our economic development to help the entire ecosystem of our education, K through 12 education system. That's what I would do as governor. It's what I did as county executive.
Monique.
To keep our teachers in the classroom, I think it's necessary to take the pressure off on teaching to a test. I think this will also allow more creativity in the classroom as well. Teachers that I've spoken with are also interested in having more flex time and instituting something similar to what existed during COVID, which was a Wednesday flex day for them to work, especially with students that maybe needed small group, and instituting, finding out what it is that they want. In addition to that, collective bargaining for class size. You know, 3 of my children went through Prince George's County Public Schools at some point. Class size was an issue. 30 kids in a class, no one's learning, and the teacher's getting overwhelmed. Safety in the school is critical. Keeping the teachers safe so they want to come to school or don't feel fear of the students. All of these are important. And I'm just going to wrap with this. in the previous question, I think that what we want to do also is bring back an opportunity for students who live, work, and play after live, work, and pay taxes after undergrad, that we relieve them of their student debt, and this would include teachers. That would keep them in our system for 5 years, and we would continue to invest in them. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ashwani.
Look, public education is everything to me. I'm a product of Maryland Public Schools. I went to a Title I elementary school, later in middle school when I was battling cancer. The entire ecosystem of that school provided me support. So I believe we need to forgive student debt for educators who teach in Maryland for at least 6 years, ensure that we have more affordable housing, making sure we have free public transit and improve access to transit, and also allow those with associate degrees in the art of teaching from community colleges to be eligible to also take the certification exams. That will help us diversify our educator pool and increase those who want to teach as well.
Tom.
We need to give them a raise. First of all, the percentage of teachers who work a second job, I'm not talking about the summer, I'm talking about during the school year, is astonishing. We need to give them more time to prepare. And we don't do that now. We need to acknowledge that we not only have a COVID crisis, we have a mental health crisis across Maryland, and it's manifesting itself in schools, whether it's the increased number of kids involved in physical altercations. There's the number of kids who are suicidal, if you look at Medicaid data. So we need to provide support for teachers and students alike. We need to make sure that we are matching the diversity of our student body with the diversity of our educators. And I think that will really help. And, you know, my kid's 5th grade teacher was Mark Elrich, who's now the county executive in Montgomery County. And Mark was a great teacher. He's a supporter of mine in this race. And, you know, Mark didn't get, there were so many barriers to teaching kids right, teaching to the test, teaching to the test. Mark opened up their eyes, and we need to let teachers
Thank you, Mr. Perez.
their creative genius.
I have a very quick follow-up question regarding the Kerwin blueprint. Everyone on this panel supports it, save Peter Franchot. If Monique could answer as to why.
Well, that's not accurate. Peter supports the blueprint. It is the challenge of how is it going to be paid for. And what we're looking at is not a temporary Band-Aid where you can pay for it over, you can pay for it for a couple of years and then you're at a loss as to how it's going to be paid for in the future. So, you know, really putting in place, and he is supportive of this blueprint, by the way. The bigger challenge is how we are going to fund. And that should always be, as a fiscal leader, the thought, how are we going to fund this? So to answer the question, he is in support. We're in a better position now that that we have a $7.5 billion surplus to pay into this system. But again, we want to look at opportunities to make sure we have a consistent flow and source to continue to pay for this, so it doesn't stop.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We're going to move on to Chair Chrissy Holt to discuss healthcare.
Thank you, Kat. Thanks, everybody. It's going great so far. We are, according to our show flow, about 10 minutes behind. I'm going to ask everybody, we're going to stay till about 11:30. If we can give time back, we will. But everybody just plan. We've got over 100 people on the call, and it's going great. So let's just stay here and keep pace. So I'm going to talk about healthcare. And this is my son's federal Blue Cross Blue Shield bill that he received on March 16th, 2022 for $327,000. His medication is $68,000 a month, and he was born uninsurable with a disease in 1995. It has stunted my career. It has taken over our entire lives to make sure that he can have health care. So I've been doing this a long time. And we face a true healthcare crisis in Maryland and across the country. And despite highly touted all-payer system, the Commonwealth Fund's most recent ratings have Maryland only slightly above in care among states and slipping. Thousands face medical bankruptcies every year. Others die because care is unavailable or unaffordable. The pandemic has only exacerbated these problems and worsened the terrible inequities in our system. Further, in 2020, Maryland privatized Medicaid by paying Oakdom $189 million to run it, to cut $50 million in healthcare services to poor Marylanders during a global pandemic. They outsourced good Maryland jobs. Opium's parent, United Health Insurance, had profited $68 billion in 2021 due to COVID, but breached Maryland's contract, wasting Maryland tax dollars, forcing, it's so upsetting, forcing providers to quit, shutting clinics, and displacing workers and patients. Years ago, the state of Connecticut switched Medicaid to a state-run program, not insurance. And they saved anywhere from 6 to 8% in administration fees, paid providers good rates, and all patients got care. What will you do to stop giving over 30% of the entire Maryland state budget to insurance companies so that all people have care and providers will get paid like in Medicaid? What is your solution? And I'm going to start with Ashwani.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing that. For me, healthcare is also a personal issue. As a cancer survivor, as someone who currently works full-time at a healthcare nonprofit, as someone who worked at U.S. Health Department on the Affordable Care Act and was one of the directors of a healthcare program called the Cancer Moonshot that was run by then Vice President Joe Biden, I understand the importance of this. And so at a local level, I want to create new health enterprise zones, invest in protecting community health clinics, making sure we have universal childcare, making sure we have reproductive justice and services that are enshrined in our state constitution so that Medicaid actually covers abortion care, contraceptive care, and gender affirmation treatment, making sure that we don't have any predatory billing practices by hospitals and insurance companies, making sure we have clean drinking water and addressing food insecurity, addressing opioid and drug use as a public health crisis, not as a crime, and investing in more mental health professionals, in addition to having more at-home care and create a caregivers program. All those issues, if tackled comprehensively and sincerely, can really help start to lower these costs and increase access to every Marylander.
Thank you, Ashwani. Tom?
Well, we have to work at two different levels. At a federal level, we've got to work to fix the system at a federal level. In 2009, we were one vote away from a Medicare for all. We were going to lower the Medicare eligibility, but Joe Lieberman got cold feet, and you know what happened there. So we've got to continue to work at a federal level. At a state level, we have a tremendous opportunity coming up, Chrissy, that you're well aware, which is that the all-payer waiver that funds healthcare in Maryland is coming up for renewal in 2 years. The next governor will be front and center in this. And as someone who served on the Kaiser Commission on Medicaid and the Uninsured, I've already put out a plan to make sure that 100% of Maryland residents can have access to quality, affordable health insurance. And by the way, we have to be willing to say that immigration status is irrelevant to your eligibility. That's a big number of the uninsured. But we need to use the all-payer waiver renewal to address the remarkably troubling racial disparities that continue to exist, to address the gaps that you've identified, Chrissy, to make sure that we're addressing gaps in dental care, to make sure that we're addressing gaps throughout the system that are making it not work for all too many people. So that all-payer waiver system process is going to be a really important thing. And I invite you to go to my website to look at what we've done in Maryland.
We're going to move on to John.
Thanks for sharing your family's story, Chrissy. Look, healthcare is a human right, regardless of immigration status. We have to ensure healthcare for every Marylander. I think the way to get there is single payer. I think we need national Medicare for all. I'll be the first governor in the country advocating for Medicare for all. In Maryland, we can move to single payer. I was proud to testify in support of Delegate Ruth's bill on a commission that would move us toward single payer in Maryland. In the immediate term, we have to make sure that folks who are undocumented have health care, and we have to reverse the privatization of Medicaid. We just have to end that. I'll work with the General Assembly to do so and ensure that the dollars are going to serving patients, not to the profits of insurance companies.
Thank you, John. Going to move on to Rushern, please.
Yeah, I don't think we can wait on the federal government. You know, I know this from as county executive dealing with uninsured and underinsured individuals throughout our county and those who are undocumented, but also on a personal level, watching when I cared for my wife, watching our prescription drug go up 300%, watching the type of care in our hospital. So we've got to move to Medicaid for all, you know, and that has to be led at the state level. We can't wait on the federal government. We've got to lead. We've got an opportunity to do that. The other thing is we definitely have to deal with privatization. It's unacceptable. And like I said, I've seen it firsthand, had to deal with it for 8 years. Healthcare is a right, you know, not a privilege. And so we have to deal with that. And we have to deal with prescription drugs, the cost of drugs that people make decisions on whether they're going to get this medicine or whether they're going to eat. That's ridiculous. And so as governor, you know, I'm not only going to have lead this effort, but also put a Secretary of Health who understands what we need to do in order to make our state the leader in this issue.
Time. Thank you.
Thank you. Monique?
Thank you so much. This is actually an issue I worked on as a council member, and actually well before that in my advocacy at the Maryland General Assembly since 2007 to focus on health and education bills to improve the lives of children. There's a recognition that the majority of people who go through bankruptcy go through it as a result directly of medical bills. What Peter and I are looking to do is expand a pilot program to expand Medicaid in Maryland and also incentivize physicians to accept Medicaid. Now, not all physicians accept that as an insurance. So we want to do that. The other expansion and access to healthcare move that we are making is the federally qualified health centers. To place those so that people have access to health. If they're in the city, no more than 15-minute walk. If they're in the cut, so to speak, no more than a 15-minute drive, but everyone should have access to healthcare. Federally qualified health centers I've worked with directly in a prescription assistance program that I established to help with chronic illnesses that people weren't addressing because of the cost. This is for people who are underinsured, not insured, or just simply need co-payment assistance in order to help with their underlying chronic conditions. I want to scale that on the state level. It's been successful in this part of the county. Prince George's County want to scale it to another level. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Of course, the answer is to remove the middleman and it's single payer. Let's move to Chris in the environment. Thank you.
The climate crisis keeps getting worse. And the transportation sector is the single largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the United States. Under the circumstances, this wasn't approving the Hogan supersized private toll road scheme a mistake? And what would you do to reverse that decision? And we'll start with Monique.
Well, listen, I think that there are certainly various ways to look at transportation and look at our climate issues. For what is in process, I'm not quite sure that anything can change. I'm not sure. But what I will say is that as a county council member, I voted against having the managed lanes in the southern part of the county, and that's on the record. But to go further into our climate issue, as a county council member, and what I look to do on the state level is forward a bill that is already passed as a result of my work to focus on protecting families, properties, and businesses from flooding. That is one of the single most problematic issues that we're having as a result of the new phenomenons called rain bombs. Our infrastructure can't handle it, our stormwater management systems. So in looking at how we build in the future, we need to be less focused on impervious surface, which would mean less roadways, not more roadways. So we're on the same page with that. But it's important to look at how to effectively get a transit system in place so that we can get people where they need to go, so that they have opportunities to get to work, job opportunities, food opportunities, and recreation opportunities as well.
Thank you. Rushern.
I think first of all, I don't agree with almost nothing that Hogan has done, especially around his transportation policies, which is why, I push for the Purple Line, which is starting now in Prince George's County, but also the Red Line in Baltimore City. And if you look at what we did over the last 8 years in this county, and I think it could be a blueprint for the state, is our job growth around a transportation system. They're around our metro systems, or they were in areas where we actually created jobs so people wouldn't have to get in their cars to go elsewhere. That's what we have to focus on, and not focusing on building more roadways. Look at where Hogan spent our transportation trust funds. He spent it to areas outside of major areas, where he spent it on roads and highways, rather than trying to make sure that we have compacted areas. The other thing is putting more resources into what we did was combine economic development with the environment, with transportation, and with having job centers. And so if you look at New Carrollton, you look at where we put our hospital, which is along the Blue Line, which it wasn't near Metro before.
Time.
You look at where we're.
Tom.
Your question was about whether it was a mistake to do what they were doing, and the answer is yes. And Peter supported it. I oppose it. We don't need those Lexus lanes. We don't need to widen the beltway. We can't simply pave our way out of gridlock. Yes, we need to replace the American Legion Bridge. We can extend the HOV lane up to the spur, but then we do not need to have these Lexus lanes. We have to understand that if we're going to address these issues, we have to understand that the new NEPA requirements are going to be looking at two issues: climate and racial equity. And the Hogan plan is going to be mired in court. It's not going to work. Let's have leadership that will actually work, leadership that will focus on transit solutions,
Tom.
making sure that we address Mark, making sure the Purple Line, all the other things we talked about. But very clearly, that was the wrong approach.
John.
Look, 270 toll road project, terrible idea, shouldn't happen. But the broader issue is we should be people-centered, not car-centered in our approach to transportation. That means we need a massive investment in public transit, build the Red Line, finish the Purple Line, Southern Maryland Light Rail project, make buses reliable and frequent throughout the state, increase the frequency of MARC, extend the MARC West. Those public transit projects are critical. Then we've got to say, how can we increase the ease with which people can walk and bike places? We need protected bike lanes. We need street design that keeps pedestrians safe. And then there are still going to be people using cars. We got to move very quickly to electric if we want to advance our climate goals. I want to build 10,000 charging stations. I want to move our entire state fleet, all state vehicles, all public transit buses, all school buses to electric by 2030. And incentivize people to replace their combustible engine cars with electric cars.
Thank you. Ashwani.
I would oppose and have opposed the toll lanes and expanding I-270. We need to support the Purple Line, the Red Line, the Southern Maryland Rapid Transit Project. I mentioned earlier about making public transit free. We need to have more designated bus lanes, expanding MARC train services, stop the subsidizing of trash incinerators and paper mills, have smart growth, invest in community solar and redeveloping brownfields, making sure we have offshore wind, making sure we mandate environmental impact studies, stop the funding of synthetic turf, improve our composting facilities, increase the poultry farm inspections, and also, as we campaign, not take a single dollar from polluters, corporations, and businesses.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question about climate change. This is a map of sort of Maryland. Everything in red on here is going to be subject to tidal flooding in 2030. And that's just going to get worse as it goes on. The General Assembly did pass a comprehensive bill in 2022 about climate change. Do you think it went far enough? And what else would each of you do to address climate change in the state of Maryland? And I'll start with Ashwani.
Yeah, I mean, building upon the answer I just gave, because climate and infrastructure really ties in together. We have to be very mindful of looking at this issue comprehensively. And if people go to our climate policy memo at janeforgovernor.com that we shared a year and a half ago, every one of those policies were made by residents who live in these kinds of communities, people of color, low income communities, people in rural communities who are typically at the short end of the stick when it comes to the enforcement of these decisions. So having the first statewide campaign in the United States that is 100% crowdsourced does go a long way when it comes to creating policy, creating the budget, and enforcing all the policies that I mentioned earlier and all the things that people will find on my website.
Tom, would you go next?
I applaud the work that was done in the Climate Solutions Act, and I think it's a really important step forward. I think the next steps involve, first of all, implementation of that, because we have to establish benchmarks, and you measure what you value what you measure. We need a base stat type project so that we're really measuring and holding ourselves accountable. We need to have a regional approach, because if we want to address water quality, for instance, we've got to go up to Pennsylvania. Senator Sarah Elfreth has been very forward-leaning in going into Pennsylvania, north of the Conowinga Dam, to address the fact that our water issues have a source up in Pennsylvania. We need to make sure we get Pennsylvania to enter the RGGI compact so that we can address air quality. All of these things, regionalism, whole of government, are going to require a leader who has the experience in bringing state, federal, and local government together. My former employee, Adam Ortiz, is now EPA Administrator Region 3. Going to work very closely with the federal government to hold Pennsylvania accountable so that we can get improvements here in Maryland.
Thank you. John.
Look, I appreciate that the Climate Solutions Act is a step forward, but it's frankly not enough. We have to be much more ambitious about our climate action. On building standards, we shouldn't have new construction that's built relying on fossil fuels. That's digging our hole deeper. All of our public buildings, all of our college campuses, all of our public schools should be using renewable energy by 2030. That's what I'm committed to. We have to be much more ambitious about transportation, investing in public transit, moving quickly to electrify all vehicles in the state. We've also, I think, got to tackle some of the deep problems in how we think about renewable energy. We still have candidates in this race who are talking about clean natural gas. That's not a thing. Clean natural gas is part of the fossil fuels problem. We have a renewable portfolio standard that includes trash incineration. That's unacceptable. We should have a goal of being net zero by 2035, and we should do everything possible across buildings, transportation, and renewable energy to get there.
Thank you. Monique.
Thank you for the question, and it is very complex, but I'll try to answer it this way. We need to preserve our tree canopy. We need to be very thoughtful about how we develop moving forward, recognizing that trees actually have work. They suck water up. So when you cut them down and put in little saplings, that does not have the same effect. So we need to preserve that. We need to go and look at infill redevelopment. So sites that already have the infrastructure in place, that are already blacktopped or impervious, so to speak, build on those and build vertical so that you have an opportunity to create density. And then you have a justification for transit. And the difference between transit and transportation is transit is what is very organized and generally dense, like a metro or bus, rapid bus. Transportation is single-use cars. So that's the difference, just in case people watching don't know. But listen, my work on the council has been focused specifically on preventiveness. We don't want to get into a situation where we are reacting. So having the Army Corps of Engineers take the study that I have implemented through a bill and take it statewide. So we could look at heavily flood-prone areas, look at the upstream behavior that's causing the downstream effect. That is the way that we will get to a solution. That, of course, as well as building and infill, preserving our tree canopy, and being mindful of everything that we do. Certainly not building in floodplains. That's something.
Thank you, candidate. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Richard.
Well, no, it didn't go far enough. I think if you talk to my good friend Paul Penske, he'd tell you it didn't. And one of the reasons is because it was watered down. And the reason these things are watered down at the state level is because people are taking money from corporations. That's why we're doing public financing. We don't have to listen to corporations or special interests in these things. We can tell the truth to power. The other thing is I want to thank my good friend Tom for talking about Adam Ortiz, who I brought in to create the only Department of the Environment at the local level to work on stormwater management, to put us out front on recycling, solar, and energy projects throughout the county and throughout the state. Those are the kind of appointments and things that I would do as governor. That led the way. I talked to a business last night, African-American business, father, son, that's doing solar. So getting all of those things involved, but we have to be able to go further. And the only way you do that is to get dark money out of politics.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it back to Kat.
Thank you. A major factor in poverty and homelessness is the lack of affordable housing in much of Maryland. What will you do to improve the situation? I'm starting with Rushern. What did you do when you were Prince George's County executive to rein in developers and incentivize the construction of affordable homes?
Well, the first thing I did was ban the county executive and county council from actually taking money from developers so that we could actually do projects that we citizens could have respect for. But that's the first thing. The second thing is we aggressively use our Department of Housing and Community Development along with the State Department of Housing and Community Development so that we had set aside for affordable housing, especially throughout our transit development. If you look at the Purple Line and the things that we did there. And then we went back to neighborhoods that we redeveloped, like Suitland, which is a great project around the metro. But we made sure as we developed those projects, it wasn't gentrification, that the people who were struggling through there got a chance to come back and actually see their not only home values rise, but be able to afford it. And so as governor, I will do the same thing. You need a very aggressive Homeland Department of Housing and Community Development Secretary. And it's something I know firsthand. I started my career after law school working in DC to provide affordable housing around U Street, 14th Street, and places like that in the district. And I learned a lot. I learned some of the mistakes that were made in the district. And we tried to rectify that in Prince George's County. And as governor, I'll do the same thing.
Monique, what did you do on the county council to ensure that poor and struggling Prince George's families had homes, and was it enough?
Let me start with this. No, not enough. And affordable is such a term, an undefined term that I want to talk about it in terms of what I understand the problem is with people experiencing homelessness. What I've seen with the senior population that I have met with over the years is that they go into what's called affordable housing and they're priced out at year 6. The incentive for the developer is great to build something called affordable housing, but the reality is very different. What we have been looking at is piloting a program that would allow people who are all the way down to a 10% of the area median income. And let's just say the area median income is $100,000, just for the sake of numbers. $10,000 a year is what someone at a 10% AMI is making. They need housing. Those are the people who are chronically experiencing homelessness. And those aren't the ones that fit into this affordable model. So we need to look at piloting a program that includes something that's heavily market rate in order to justify, almost like a bell curve. You have the standard deviation, 70%, which should be the market rate. And then you have the tiers of 60 all the way down to 10% AMI, area median income. So those people making $10,000, $20,000, so much a year are getting housing. They won't get a lot, but it's only justified and sustainable if you do it with wraparound services, with commercial amenities, with those things.
Thank you, candidate. Thank you, candidate.
Support and transit, obviously. No one should know they're poor. Let's just kind of put it that way, and let's look at housing in terms of.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Tom. When you were in Montgomery County, what did you do to provide affordable housing for residents?
We dramatically revised our MPDU program. That's our inclusionary zoning program. One of the best in the country, but it wasn't good enough. And so we revamped it so that if you were building 100 units of housing, at least 15 had to be affordable at 60% of area median income. We addressed the fact that there are many different folks in different situations. So we created what are called public living quarters for people who were experiencing homelessness. My wife has worked on the homelessness issue for 25 years. We need, as a state, to understand that we have many different things we can do. And the first thing we should do is increase our affordable housing trust fund, because we don't have enough skin in the game. The next thing we should do is to make sure we are rooting out discrimination at a local level, state level, and federal level. I worked on rooting out discrimination. I settled the 2 largest fair lending cases in the history of the Fair Housing Act. What we also did at a local level, and we should do at a state level, is help first-time home buyers. There are many people who can afford the mortgage payment, but they can't get into the home. So let's help them get into the home. Let's use state-owned land that institutions that have been shut down. The cost of land is what drives up the cost of housing. Let's do an audit of all the state-owned properties and work with communities to turn them into opportunities for affordable housing and zoning laws across the state. We're going to have a conversation about increasing.
I'm going to give Ashwani a stab at this. How are you going to increase the stock of affordable housing throughout the state of Maryland?
Yeah, I served as one of President Obama's White House liaisons at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And so that's why my housing plan on my website has 3 parts: increasing affordability, increasing availability, and increasing sustainability of housing. When it comes to affordability, I talk about providing immediate relief so that no one is being evicted during times of crisis, expanding our MPDU programs, and dedicated funding for nonprofits that help those who are chronically homeless. When I talk about availability, I talk about smart growth and prohibiting discrimination based on source of income. And when I talk about sustainability, I talk about improving forbearance notifications for homeowners, increasing the eviction filing fees, providing just cause protections in place, and with my Maryland Now plan, making sure that folks have access to good jobs and a reduced cost of living.
Thank you. And John.
Thanks. Well, we should start from the principle that housing is a human right. And starting there, you have to dismantle the racist exclusionary zoning laws that have shaped our housing sector throughout history. We need a statewide inclusionary zoning law that helps ensure that we can build multifamily housing near transit hubs, metro stops, purple line stops, future red line stops. We also need to invest in our housing trust fund. Maryland put in about $50 million from the mid-90s to the mid-20-teens, whereas DC is putting in, before COVID, nearly $200 million a year, a tenth our size. So we need to invest much more in our housing trust fund. We ought to allow more accessory dwelling units. We ought to pursue the Social Housing Act that's been proposed in the General Assembly to allow government directly to build housing that can be shared. And we need to dramatically strengthen the protections for tenants. I testified this year in favor of Delegate Wilkins' Just Cause Evictions bill. We ought to raise the eviction filing fee, as Attorney General Franchot has proposed. We need to have a strategy that ensures that, again, we treat housing as a human right.
Thank you. And we'll move on to Chrissy.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Kat, and thanks everybody. This is a great forum. I think everybody attending is learning so much from each of you. So we have three more actions. I have 2 more questions for you, and then we're going to take the survey again, right? So before we took a survey, what our membership was thinking about in terms of voting, and then we'll do it after the forum, and we will share the results. We will email them out. So we need everybody attending to stay with us, stay online, and we're going to change topic now to criminal justice reform. And I'm going to keep it pretty open. So the open-ended question on criminal justice: what reforms do you support at this time to make the system fairer, juster, and more humane? And I'm going to start with Ashwani.
Yeah, we have to do a lot. We have to end extreme sentences for children. We have to end the money bail system. We have to continue the end of for-profit prison contracts. We have to treat opioid and drug use as a public health crisis, not as a crime. We have to invest in more mental health professionals in our school systems and in our criminal justice system. We have to prepare those who are in prison for life outside of prison. We have to have independent oversight, limit the influence of ICE for nonviolent offenders, eliminate the SROs from our public schools, and again, invest in more public health officials and social workers and guidance counselors, legalize marijuana while expunging records, and making sure that folks have access to good jobs and a reduced cost of living. Because when people of color are being disproportionately killed by public servants, we have a severe problem with our system. And accountability does not diminish the good work that is also being done, but we demand accountability in every field, and our criminal justice system should be no different.
Thank you. John, please share back.
Yeah, look, this is a very deeply personal issue to me. You know, I described earlier how I lost both my parents as a kid, and I struggled as a teenager. I actually got kicked out of high school. And it was only because of teachers and a school counselor gave me a second chance that I'm alive today. If I'd been fed into the school to prison pipeline, I'd be dead or in prison today. And that's why I've testified in favor of youth justice reforms. We made some progress this General Assembly session, but we have a lot more to do, including ending the automatic charging of young people as adults for such a long list of crimes, which Maryland is unique in doing. We've got a lot of work to do to reimagine public safety. That means investing in mental health services, addiction treatment, violence prevention programs like State Streets. It means safe streets. It means investing in reentry support so that folks are getting education and job training while incarcerated, and support when they come home, as 95% of the folks who are incarcerated will. We need to invest in trauma teams that respond instead of just a police officer who's responding and dealing with a mental health crisis they're not trained to respond to. We need to fully implement the policing reforms that the General Assembly passed. And as we do that, we really need to remove qualified immunity and hold police officers accountable when they violate the civil rights of individuals.
Thank you, John. Going to move on to Rushern, please.
Yes, this is an issue I've been working on my entire adult life since coming out of law school, and so has my wife. You have to use a holistic approach, something people don't like to hear, but actually having dealt with this issue as a legislator, the number of African Americans and people of color who are in our jails, one, we'll go a long way by expunging the records of those who are in jail because of marijuana use. The other is to make sure that when our folks come returning citizens, actually have the support they need when they get back into their neighborhoods. Something we did in Prince George's County by putting a one-stop shop, so you can get your ID, healthcare, housing, job training, all of that. We start working with our returning citizens before they return. We also do work with our young people while they're in our custody in the Prince George's County's jail. More emphasis on health. So it's a holistic approach to doing this, both at the state level, because you have to understand what the state role is. What the General Assembly did was great, but most of our decisions about criminal justice and interaction happens at the local level, which is why when I became a county executive, before Ferguson happened, we actually implemented an implicit bias training for our police officers. We revamped training. We completely got rid of the entire training apparatus in Prince George's County and brought in new because we wanted to make sure that we were, and then we brought in more officers of color with training. So it's a holistic approach. It's something I would do as governor, and I think it can be done where you can actually reduce crime and reduce arrests. That's where we want to get to. And so look forward to doing that as governor.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Monique and then Tom. Monique.
So much. I agree with Rushern Baker's points. I mean, that's exactly right. This has to be a holistic attempt. Obviously, helping people. If we're looking at crime, that's one thing. Let's look at why crimes are committed. Let's deal with those issues of people having food insecurity and housing insecurity. But when we look at some of the law enforcement behavior, we've got to look at maybe mental health on both sides, working in cahoots, so to speak, and I'm basing that on a Eugene, Oregon relationship that police have with mental health services, so that when they get calls, and they recognize that police don't actually have to go out to them, and they can send out their mental health support for that. This is something that we need to implement. We need to look at the accountability of our police officers, those that have a history of wrongdoing. We need to have that open so that people can actually have access to understanding that information. So the Maryland Public Information Act standards to allow their police misconduct to be put out there. We want to get rid of all of the no-knock warrants so that that's not an issue with regard to mistakes happening and people getting hurt unnecessarily. But ultimately, we want community police. We want people who've grown up in the community to police their community. There's a sensitivity, there's a cultural understanding, there's a lot that goes into the respect of the individuals and what they might be going through because of the individual who may have grown up in that environment as well. So we definitely want to also review civilian deaths.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Tom?
I had the privilege of working on these issues for many years in the Civil Rights Division, and most recently 10 years ago when I was leading the Civil Rights Division. So these issues are near and dear to my heart. I spent a lot of time going across the country, suing jurisdictions in the school to prison pipeline context. We have to understand here in Maryland, we have the highest incarceration rate of Black men in the country. I think what we need to do here is work with states' attorneys to figure out, is there bias in charging decisions? What is going on? Why do we have the highest incarceration rate of Black men in the country? I prosecuted an LAPD officer pre-Rodney King to give you a sense of how long I've been working in the police reform context. The most important tool a police officer has in his or her arsenal is the trust of the community. We need to work together to build relationships of trust. We need to reject false choices. Are you for the police? Are you for the community? We can be for both. I have put in place, worked with local governments to make sure that we reduce crime, restore respect for law enforcement, and create these win-win situations. We need to build out a community mental health infrastructure everywhere.
Thank you.
And we need to make sure that the Department of Juvenile Services is working well. We've had a chronic challenge there over years.
We have, Tom. Thank you very much for that. Okay, we're in our final question, and for some time constraints, I'm going to move the order around. Appreciate you staying online. Our final question is also an opportunity for you to single out a piece of legislation or an action that demonstrates that you support our progressive values and why our Revolution Maryland should support you. We are going to lead off with Rushern and then Ashwani.
Well, thank you for having us here today. And here's what I would lead with. Public financing. The entire reason I'm doing public financing and Nancy's doing public financing is you can't speak truth to power or change the system if you're taking money from the very people who are going to influence you when you get in there. That's why we're not taking corporate money or special interests. I've learned firsthand as county executive trying to change a big government, the second largest in the state, that if you accept money from developers and corporations, you get bogged down. And so that's why I banned it as my first act as county executive and banned it for council members. If we're going to do the things that we talked about this morning, which we need to do, then you can't be influenced by those corporations. That's why you get watered down health insurance, or health reform. That's why you get watered down environmental policies. That's why you can't create the kind of jobs that are sustainable for our mid-sized businesses. And so for me, it starts with campaign finance reform. For Nancy Navarro, it starts with campaign finance reform. It is our philosophy. It's how we're going to do the right thing. So thank you. And I will apologize in advance. I've got an event that's going on that I've got to run to, but thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Rushern, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for running. We appreciate you joining us. Thank you. Ashwani?
Absolutely. I mean, I would be honored to earn your support because of your work looking at every issue comprehensively as we address today and really trying to make politics inclusive and accessible. That's the whole reason why I'm running for governor and why we're going to win, because unlike other candidates, I am fully accessible because 100% of our events are free. I am fully accountable because 100% of our campaign is run by residents from every age, every background in every county. And I'm fully transparent because we have shared the most detailed and comprehensive policy agenda a year and a half ago in January of 2021, we have already built one of the largest grassroots campaigns in Maryland, and we did it without focusing on fundraising. So we're going to win because of our focus on engaging more Marylanders in the process, empowering volunteers, and one-on-one voter contact. You can always go to janeforgovernor.com to hold us accountable, to learn more, but I really do appreciate your work and this opportunity.
Thank you, Ashwani, for joining us today. We appreciate you running for office, and thank you. So I'm going to go ahead to Monique now.
Thank you for the opportunity to come today. I don't know if there's one specific thing that I can point to and say, this is why you need to vote for me, but I can say that the culmination of work that I have done, in addition to the work that Peter Franchot has done and continues to do, is exemplary of what it will take to build upon in order to achieve generational wealth, health, education, and economic development opportunities for us all. Our desire is to raise boats. What we say is that the rising tide, the high tide raises all boats, and that's what we're attempting to do here. And we're not rhetorical. The work that we have done has been proven. Peter, in his work to to get rid of the gas tax temporarily, that was his idea, so that we could have money back in our pockets. Of course, it was implemented elsewhere. For the work that I've been able to do with the drone camp locally to get our elementary, middle, and high school students connected with building drones, managing the drone, coding the drone, and learning applications to take to the next level. The work that we've done in healthcare, that I've done in healthcare in the immediate area, with the expansion of the prescription assistance program to help those who otherwise might not be able to manage their underlying health issues. For Peter's phenomenal work in our budget and being the fiscal person that he is, in order to allow us to get to the point where we have a surplus of nearly $8 billion. We look forward to investing those funds into nonprofits that have expertise in some of these issues that are helping, that have competency in helping the community that we know government is not really prepared to do, although we want to work in conjunction with them. We also want to continue to, on the trajectory to help improve the lives of people and to be a steward of the land in our community. So thank you so much, because I think that collective is what will allow us to be successful. And we look forward to having us all improve our lifestyles under the Franchot-Anderson Walker administration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Monique. Thank you for your time today. Appreciate you joining the council, the forum. Tom?
Civil rights, labor rights, and immigrant rights. That's been the focus of my 35 years in public service. And that's a huge focus of your work at Our Revolution. Civil rights is the unfinished business of America. Income inequality is one of the defining issues and challenges of our time. We have always been a nation of immigrants, and Donald Trump doesn't like that. And that's the work I've done. That's the work I'll continue to do. I'm so proud of the work I've done together with Keith Ellison, who's a strong supporter of my campaign. The work I've done with Larry Cohen and others, the support of all the labor movement members who supported our campaign. Folks, we have an unbelievable opportunity to move the needle on all the issues we've discussed today. Healthcare is a civil right. Healthcare should be a right for all, not a privilege for a few. The same with housing. These are the issues I have worked on throughout my career. The next governor does need to be the multitasker in chief. The next governor needs to implode stovepipes. The next governor needs to make sure zip code never determines destiny. And that's been the work of my life. That's why I'm running for governor. And I've enjoyed working with so many of you over the course of these chapters to make sure Maryland works for everyone. We are the richest state in the United States. We punch below our weight. Let's not do that anymore. Let's tackle together those challenges of civil rights, labor rights, immigrant rights, fairness for everyone, opportunity for everyone. That's been my work, and that'll continue to be my work. And I would love and be honored to have your support and assistance in this journey.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for running. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
John?
Well, grateful for the conversation this morning. I hope to work together with our revolution to build the movement we need to ensure that we deliver in Maryland on the principle that healthcare is a human right, that housing is a human right, that clean air and clean water are a human right. And to get there, we have to be willing to take on entrenched interests. We have to be willing to ask those who make over $1 million a year, ask large corporations to pay their fair share. That is how we will have the resources to deliver on universal affordable childcare, to deliver on world-class schools for all of our kids. I want to work with you to build that movement. And just as I have the support of the Lower Shore Progressive Caucus, we've been focused as a campaign on grassroots organizing. You know, some of my opponents have fancy insider endorsements, but my focus has been on the grassroots movement. We need to get these things done, to build a real mandate for progressive change. I've spent my life in public education as a public education student, as a teacher, as a principal, as secretary of education, as a fighter for education and civil rights. And I look forward to working with our revolution to ensure that we not only just win in July, but that we win in November and then come in January to Annapolis with a strong progressive mandate for change.
Thank you, John. And thank you, everybody, for joining today. This was a very informative forum and panel, and we really appreciate your time and attention, and again, running for office. So we're about to end, but don't leave yet. First, we're going to ask all the attendees to vote on who they now are likely to support, and we will share the results in the email. And we're excited to see how today's forum impressed you. So we want to thank all of our speakers. We want to do a huge shout out to Hal Ginsberg, our state organizer. And nothing happens here without Hal Ginsberg. So Hal is amazing. Let's all give him a big, snap there. Charles, Carlos, thank you for your help. Panelists, Kat, Chris, Ed's behind the scenes, everybody at Our Revolution Maryland. We are a strong volunteer team. We give of our time, talent, and treasure because we volunteer. And all of these progressive policies and values are important to us, and they're important to our families. It's not working. It's not working. Society is not working for the people. And it's time that we change that. And we are looking for a strong, progressive leader who's going to do just that. I don't want to leave this world for my kids. And I don't think anybody on this panel today or attending today is okay with status quo. So with that, we're coming to the end. And you guys remember our chat for Our Revolution. So let's go. We're going to say it 3 times. We're going to unmute everybody. And when we organize, you say we win. When we organize,
we win.
When we organize,
we win.
When we organize,
we
win.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Hey, and come visit us tomorrow. Quick shout out. We're going to be at First Sunday in Annapolis. We'll have it Medicare for All table. We're running a petition to get Chris Van Hollen to sign on to the Senate Medicare for All bill that's going to drop right around May 12th. Come see us. We're going to be talking to voters. We're going to get them to sign on to the petition and get them to sign the Medicare for All bill. It's way past time, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We'll be there about 11 to 2. So come on out and sign our petition. Thanks so much. Thanks to everybody. Thanks for running. Take care.